Hello, everybody. So, I wanted to show everybody what I've been doing with coding lately. And so, the whole point of this was I just wanted to get data off the internet. I wanted to do what they call scraping information off the internet, which is just basically if there's something on a web page, like here I'm on Yahoo's front page, that I could just grab information off of it. So, as an example, there's a section of Yahoo that actually a lot of people, big business types, do use, which is called Yahoo Finance. And so if you go to Yahoo Finance, then here you go, and you can get information. So you might want to get information off of the internet and drop it into a spreadsheet and do various things with it. It seems to me that this would be something that would be really easy to do. And as it turns out, it's way harder than I thought. So this represented hours and hours and hours of coding and learning how to grab things off the internet. But I feel like I'm pretty good with it now. I'm sure that there are people that are much better, but I mean, I've really learned a ton as far as how this thing goes. So I feel like if it's on the internet, I can get it. So of course, you're limited to what we call the surface web, which is things that are available to anybody, but that is just such a tremendous amount of information. So, and especially with social media data, because they'll give you an API and they'll let you extract some information, but maybe not all of it. And so, with marketing projects and finance projects, I feel like being able to get your data directly off the internet is probably a valuable thing. And so, in academics, we talk about secondary data sources and things like that. I mean, I guess this is like an aggregated data source that you're getting from out in the wild. So, I mean, it's not like survey data. So you're not getting data that's 100% proprietarily yours, but you're aggregating data that's publicly available. And that's not something that maybe just anybody could do. So really the internet's your data set. For the first application I had various things that I do with the internet. This is just a massive time waster with me. What it is I will go to the internet and then go to Facebook and then to something on Facebook called Marketplace. And then on Marketplace, I'll search for things like, something called like Boss Pedals. And then I'll just sit there and search. This is usually a pretty simple search. Or maybe I'll search for like one of the synthesizers I own is called a Yamaha Motif. And I'll see like who is selling a Motif these days? Where are they? And I'll just search and search and search. And if you are trying to get a good bargain, this is a good way to do it. But the thing is, the searches aren't that great. And I mean, the more you try to get your search to narrow down, you'll find that this tool it's kind of like the classifieds, right? So another example is like right now the Yamaha, their flagship synth is no longer the Motif, it's called the Montage. So, you can search for the Montage, but they're going to give you things like dresses and whatnot. But I've sat there and I've just searched for different things on here and spent truly more than 24 hours doing it. Just a complete waste of time because the tool isn't that great. You have to sit there and type these things in. And then also complicating this is that I won't necessarily just search one area. Like here it's searching Detroit, within 100 miles of Detroit. But I would go to Akron if there were something in Akron that I wanted to buy, and I would do it because I have relatives there. So it would give me a chance to visit them. Dayton's kind of the same story. I might go to Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's not that far. It just kind of depends on how much money I'd be saving by making all the driving. So that is setting up the problem. And again, just the way that this is, it just takes hours and hours to do this. So what I wanted to do was implement let's see if I hope I don't get too many notifications while this is going on. So I automated this in Python. And so one thing that you realize very quickly is any social media platform does not like scraping. In fact, I think in some cases it's explicitly against their policies for you to use any type of automated scraping. If they detect that you are scraping, they'll try to stop you. that's one of the other reasons why I really refined this code using Marketplace, because I figured this isn't really personal data. It's not like I'm looking at people's profiles. And so if Facebook were to get snippy with me, maybe they're more likely to forgive me. I did run into issues where they would shut down a session. And basically what it meant was they would just stop feeding me data. And they did that if I requested the data too quickly. Usually if I requested data after I had sent a request, but they hadn't given me my previous data yet. If I asked for more, then they just stopped giving me data from that point onward. It could be that they detect that I'm a bot, or it could be that they're just thinking like, hey, this guy's really wasting our time. We're not even done giving him the last data that he asked for, and he's already asking for more. So what you can do in your code, I mean, almost any computer programming language or computer platform has an idea of being able to pause the execution of your code for a little while. So here I define that with a variable called sleep time. Sleep time is set very high to 20. This program will run with sleep time set to 1, and 1 means 1 second. So sleep time of 20 means that this, when I invoke sleep time, that it doesn't do anything for 20 seconds. I have yet to run into any difficulty when I do that. So I'll get, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 records back. It just takes a long time. So I'll kick off the job on a computer that's not my main computer and just let it run all night. And then in the morning I can look at the results. So, and depending on the operation, like I think a couple times here, I've got sleep time times 2. Like here it's like time sleep, so it's going to sleep for the normal sleep time for 20 minutes or 20 seconds. And so like here is sleep time divided by 2. I don't need to sleep quite as long. Here is sleep time times 2. So I just put it up here so that I could mess around with it. 14 or 15 kind of worked too, but this made sure that I got all the way through, because what happens is the other times it just blows up, and then I don't know. You could try to resume, but that's kind of hairy too. I also tried breaking this up among several computers, where each one searched for different items or cities and distributed it. And then, like, I would go ahead and kick off the job on all 3 computers at once. Immediately, I think Facebook detected that all the requests were coming from one scraping farm, and then they stopped providing data to any of the computers. So those are the challenges. When you're hitting up social media, a lot of my effort, probably like the programming was half of my effort here, but then trying to find out why my code was blowing up was the other half. And sometimes it was because my code was bad, but sometimes it's because Facebook discovered that I was scraping. So let me go ahead and run this, and I'll show you what it's doing. And so here, this is the file that it's pulling. I've got a network at home, so on my Y drive, it's pulling up a program called Soup version 2, and the reason for that is that I'm using a tool called Beautiful Soup. So in the midst of all these sleep commands, it opened up this browser, so this isn't like a normal Chrome session, and this one says Chrome's being controlled by automated test software. So it goes into Facebook Marketplace, and then kind of cool here, it should maximize this. I'll make this bigger just in case. But, and I've got it paused, so the idea being that Facebook's not going to detect that a machine is doing this. Now it put in the password and login ID, and then it hit enter. This is 2-factor authentication using Google Authenticator. I'm not going to type this in, the computer calculates it for me. So I've got a hashing algorithm in there that duplicates the functionality of Google Authenticator. And here we go. So the first search I'm doing is for Toledo, Ohio here, and then for something called a Maxon pedal. And so it sits there and it grabs all this information, and then after a little while, it will dump all this information to another file on the network. And so I think I might have the display a print command that shows you what exactly it does, but it's telling me right now that it's searching in Toledo for Maxon pedals. And then it's going to sleep at various times while it's executing this. Again, just to make sure that we're not overloading the requests. There we go. So it found 49 different records there, and then it dumped them in there. They're not all applicable. So Facebook does a kind of search that's a little fuzzy in nature. So now we're searching for a Boss pedal in Toledo. So I'm going to move this off the screen and walk through the code a little bit. So this is done with something called Selenium. The other thing that you'll see data scientists use is something called requests. The trouble with requests is, as Selenium works, I can see this. It creates a little Chrome session, and I can see what Selenium's doing. But Selenium is driving this. Selenium is sending the keystrokes, requesting the pages, and so again, there's another program called Request that does it. But when Request does it, it doesn't give you this. It doesn't give you a browser that is showing you what's going on. So if you're doing Request, it's probably faster, but it doesn't let you know what's going on. And as I was debugging, I needed to see things like, well, what is the code for that button that I need to click? So it just dumped a bunch of results, and now it's looking for something called a red howler microphone. And so again, there we go. So this is many, many searches. So again, going through this, time is just a function that Python uses to do time-related things. Import CSV, this handles comma-separated variable files, comma-separated value files, and I am importing comma-separated value files for things like my login information or the secret key for that hashing algorithm so that we can get past the authenticator. And then I am exporting a comma-separated value file that has all the results in it. So these are all things under Selenium. Now you can do something called like Selenium import star, which means that it just imports everything in Selenium. The trouble is that's a lot of stuff. And so with Python, you load these things as you need them. This isn't like quite a few programming languages where all the functionality of the programming language is already kind of set before you start going. So then date and time is kind of self-explanatory. PyOpt, I didn't write this, but this is the subroutine that will calculate the hash so that you can use it with Authenticator. And then line cache and socket are a couple of things that are just used at various points here. BS4, Beautiful Soup. This is, I'll explain it a little bit later. What I'm doing is I'm grabbing the web page and then stuffing it into this package called Beautiful Soup. And then Beautiful Soup organizes the web page in a way that makes it a little bit easier to extract data from. I'm not sure that it's tons and tons easier, but it is definitely some amount easier. Beautiful Soup is used by everybody that's doing data science. So super common package. People would much rather drop their data into Beautiful Soup and have it do all the parsing and organization of the web pages for you. Okay, so here just kind of setting some flags and variable values, and then giving it places to go, and then loading in something, my Chrome options. So what this is I'm loading in this sort of fake Google Chrome and then calling it WebD. So driver means Selenium here. So the Selenium driver is running Chrome that is located at this location. And then once it does that, we're calling that WebD. Usually you'll see a lot of code written like this, and then the ultimate thing that they use later is called driver. So I just didn't want to rewrite all my code. That seems to be the common convention. In fact, when you look at a lot of data science and scraping apps, everybody's using the same variable names. So it's almost like there's this sort of informal de facto standardization of a lot of these variable names. So WebD maximize window. So what does that mean? It means this command will, when this browser thing comes up, it takes it and goes boom. And so sometimes that's important depending on the page you're going on. So a maximized page will show more things. So sometimes you do want to maximize your page. Okay. Get host name. This is print comp name. That's printing the name of my computer because I have multiple computers here. It should have printed my computer name somewhere. Didn't like it. Where is that? I don't know. It might have rolled off here. It looks like it did because I've lost the city and everything. But it prints it to the output here. And then for a while I was putting the computer name in the name of the file that it printed out to, but I'm not anymore. Okay, this is the list of searches. These are the things that I'm searching for, like harmonica microphones, Fender Stratocasters, whatever. And then here is the wait command. So it's using standard stuff that's in Selenium. And then grabbing now, which is the current time. This then creates the name of an output file. And then the output file is this standard file path. Well, where is standard file path? File path's up here, YPython, so it's dropping it on my network. Then calling it FB market, and then plus now, so it timestamps it, and then CSV. So that's how I can tell when these things were run. So it still hasn't done it yet. It's just defining what it's going to be called if it were called something, and then it drops the name of the file into the console window. So next, then it reads like here it read the searches. Here it reads the cities that I want it to go into. And then with Facebook, they kind of have a combination of codes for some cities. Like if cities aren't very big, they get a number. So Toledo, Akron, and Dayton, Sandusky, they get numbers. Ann Arbor actually gets a word, Ann Arbor, like that. And Fort Wayne actually gets a word. So those are the cities that I search. And then right now we're in a while loop. So while the city index is less than the total number of cities, so here total cities was just how many things on the city list, -1, because when Python counts things, it starts counting at 0, not 1. So it's -1. Okay, so then while the search flag is not equal to done, meaning that it's still got to find it, then really we're just reading, looking for our stuff, and then getting the search URL, meaning whatever the URL was that we built. And then if we are already logged in, then we don't log in. I wanted to put this at the top of the code outside the loop. And I don't know, I may do that at some time in the future, but for now it just worked better this way. I had other issues to deal with. So, but it would make more sense to put this outside the loop and just have it hit at one time. And I guess I could, but then we went on, and then this is where really all the smarts are happening. So codes, C-O-D-E-Z, and you'll notice that programmers will misspell words deliberately. It's always been this way. It was this way in the 70s when they taught me how to code. But we would deliberately misspell words, and the reason was you want to avoid accidentally hitting a reserved word that the compiler or the interpreter is going to use. So codes is equal to the WebD page source. So this is the Selenium source of the page. So when you get an HTML page like this, if you're in Chrome and you hit your F11 key, you can actually see the source that created, oh no, not F11. What is view source? Hold on a sec. Get out of here. Use view source, I use inspect. So like here. But this would be an example of the code that creates your web page. So let me grab a thing so I can see like I guess you can just right click on the whole page. So like if I right click on the page, inspect, view page source, there it is. This is how a web page ends up in your browser. Well, you send a request to Facebook and then they shoot all of this to your browser, and then your browser just knows how to interpret all this. So everything that's on your web page is represented by something in here. So it's just tons and tons of stuff that's just represented by things here. Not all of it shows up. Some of this is just, it's invisible. It just got shot to you when they shot you the web page. But that's your source. This is why you can scrape data from it. So what happens here is we're dumping all of this data into this variable codes, and then we're beautiful souping the codes. So beautiful soup again is a package, and then what we're calling that is soup. So the soup variable represents all of the page source stuffed into beautiful soup. So beautiful soup is like a management tool. It helps you extract things. So here I'm getting like the title of each item, the price, the location. The href means the URL. So each of these items has its own little web address. And then these replace commands are done for a few reasons. One is, for instance, this is new line and return. These are like hitting your enter key and creating a second line. I don't want that. I want everything in one line, so I'm getting rid of all that. Other thing is because it's comma separated values, I don't want commas in my data because commas are how I'm going to separate my data. So I replace all my comments with a semicolon. These two commands, this took, oh my lord, my code blew up so many times because I would run and I'd get thousands and thousands of records, and then somebody would put in something very weird, some kind of strange Unicode. Like, for instance, Unicode. There's a Unicode actually for piano keys. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, so like here. There's actually a Unicode for this. And so what would happen is part of Unicode 6.0. So what would happen is that I would sit there and run, and I'm extracting thousands and thousands of records, and then my code would blow up because it didn't recognize the Unicode and I couldn't write it to my output file. So basically what this is doing is it's encoding this stuff in something called UTF-8, and then it's replacing all of the characters with a question mark. So if you don't tell it what to replace things with, it replaces it with a question mark. And then it's decoding it back into like normal comma separated value stuff. So so that's what this was, because I just it wasn't just that keyboard thing. It would be like every day I'd get like 2 or 3 more characters. I had no idea what they were. Just some weirdo had put them in his ad. And so then we're counting the records out, and that's it. And so at the end, it just prints success. So, I mean, the point of this wasn't really to automate this task. This was just something that I actually do in my personal life. And so it had some value to me. But the value here is that now, again, the surface web is your data set. So I think, there's some ethical issues. You have to run this by IRB. If I am scraping anything that I think relates to people's information, I would probably try to contact the academic groups at Facebook and Twitter. And so as soon as I have some specific projects, I'll probably do that. Because you can sometimes get permission to scrape things for academic purposes, but the trouble is, and most folks know this, but this Cambridge Analytica thing. These are the guys that, if you ever hear that thing about the analytics company that helped Donald Trump get elected by pushing ads to I don't want to get political with this, but pushing basically they pushed ads to people to make specific demographic groups angry and more likely to vote. And so the trouble with this was, at first they went to Facebook and they said, hey, look, we've got this academic project, and the Cambridge part of this is Cambridge University over in England. And we have this project where we want to see if we can determine people's personality profile on something called the Ocean Index. We want to get an Ocean score on people based on their Facebook profile, and we're just going to analyze their likes. And so Facebook said, oh, wow, that sounds good. I mean, we can help academics. Good. Yeah, go ahead. And so they distributed a survey and collected personality inventories from a bunch of people. And then they went out and ran their algorithms against those people's profiles. But the trouble was, and I'm not sure that Facebook even knew some of these things, but then they ran them against those people's friends lists without permission. So it's one thing for the initial group. They actually paid the initial people who took the survey. They got, I don't know, $10 or something. But then they started running it against people who were not participating, which is unethical. And then the other thing was that it was supposed to be used only for academic purposes and not for commercial purposes. And then the douchebag who did this project left Cambridge, the university, and then started a private consulting company, but used the data that he had harvested under the agreement that he would not use it for commercial purposes. So really, when that all came to light, Facebook clamped down on everything. Like, some of you who are older like me, you can probably remember back when you could go to somebody's Facebook profile and look at all their huge friends list, and now they've really locked things down. It's more private. And again, in the past, when they would stop you for hitting them with bots, the only two things they were really that concerned about was that you weren't creating fake profiles and that you weren't hitting them too much, right? Database calls are inexpensive if you're doing a few of them, but if you're doing millions and millions of them, then their processing time starts to actually cost money. But now it was such a complete problem that Facebook and most of these social media providers are really trying not to have anything to do with any of this. So that's why this stuff is way more problematic. But it doesn't have to be social media data that you scrape. And so I don't know. I think Twitter might be an interesting source because people will hashtag companies. So then you could do things like run sentiment analysis against those companies' Twitter hashtagged tweets and, compare it to their, I don't know, something like their stock price. That's an academic project that they were doing a long time ago, but just as an example. But the other thing is you can scrape anything on the surface web. So there's always a data set out there. Once you can do this, there's a data set somewhere that you can go and get on your own. So this thing's still chugging away. A lot of the coding that I did, it's not that many lines of code. It's less than 200 lines of code. But if you know Python, Python is just very functionality dense on each individual line of code. And so what that means is that like maybe something that you can do in Python with 1 or 2 statements might take you 10 or 20 statements in an old programming language like COBOL that I used to program in. So 200 lines of codes, I mean, that's a lot of Python code. But a lot of this was just built to avoid errors. That's what took a lot of the time was what's making me blow up? Why am I blowing up? And I mean, you can't do anything about if Facebook just stops giving you data, but you should handle anticipated things like people give you Unicode characters that you don't recognize. So, I mean, I was sitting there picking those off one or two at a time until finally I had like 8 or 9 Unicode characters and thought, man, I've got to find a better way to handle these Unicode exceptions. And so this code, again, pretty fault tolerant. It's run several times. Right now we're up to, 400? No, we're up to actually way more records than that already. Because each Facebook page is about 50 records, so 600 something records. This will run until it hits like 8,000 records or so. And used to be I would measure the success by how far it would go before it would blow up. So it's like in the beginning it would go 200 records, and then it would hit 800 records, I'd go 4,000 records. And now this thing's pretty fault tolerant. It really doesn't blow up, not anymore. And a lot of it is just setting the sleep time long enough so that you don't raise anybody at Facebook's suspicion they stop giving you data. But that wasn't the only reason this thing would blow up. It would blow up because of logic errors, or it would blow up because of data exceptions. So again, it's pretty fault tolerant. So that's what I'm doing. Hope to incorporate this into some research here soon. I'm hoping that my dissertation area is going to be something like social media analytics. But that always starts with data, right? So that was why this was the first step in what I had to do. So that's all I got. This is what I've been spending all my time with lately. I probably wrote more code in the last 2 months than I've written in the last 20 years. So, but it was good. I needed to get better with Python, but also to learn these things. The deal with Python is these packages. It's almost like you learn Python and it's like a starter language, and then all these things are the advanced aspect of the language. So like you have to learn Beautiful Soup. That's like a discipline all of its own. And then Selenium is like its own, like in the old days, Selenium would be like a programming language. Now it's just a feature that you import into Python. So that's all I got. That was a little long-winded, but I thought I would show everybody. If you want this code, I'm going to start throwing my code up on GitHub. So please don't ask until then. Once it's up, I'll go ahead and put the link to the GitHub for this code in the comments. But this code's working pretty good. I'll just make sure I've got any personal thing stripped out of here. But this is honestly, this could maybe be a business. I don't know. Facebook Marketplace, they do every once in a while some good stuff shows up. Ultimately, I'd want to run this like continuously throughout the day and then have it give me an incremental list of things that I didn't see before. Because sometimes if something's too good on Facebook Marketplace, it's gone within an hour or two. But yeah, so that's it. So if it's on the web, you can drop it into your data set. That's the bottom line for all of this.